Peter Okwache, welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. South Africa's President Jacob Zuma will pay back some of the taxpayers' money spent on his private ranch. His lawyers tell the country's highest court will have the very latest. Mobile and online betting are taking Kenya by storm, but what impact is this having on business and on people? We take a close look at the gambling industry. Leaders from the world's top mining companies gather in South Africa to face one of its biggest challenges in recent times. And in sports, Nigeria coach Sunday Olise says sorry to his country's football federation for his outburst against his critics. He had called them insane. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Lawyers for the South African president have told the country's constitutional court that Jacob Zuma will repay all improvements to his ranch that were not security related. Mr. Zuma's lawyers made the announcement as the court sat to consider whether he should pay back some of the $23 million worth of taxpayers' money spent on refurbishing his private home. The case has been brought by opposition parties, some of whom held demonstrations outside the courthouse in Johannesburg chanting, "Pay back the money and Zuma must fall." We can now cross live to Johannesburg and the BBC's Nomsa Maseko. Nomsa, please bring us up to speed on today's events.
Well, Peter, after years of denials, we heard today from President Jacob Zuma's advocate, Jeremy Gauntlet, that he's now prepared to pay back some of the money that was used to refurbish his private home in Nkandla. This is a huge turnaround from the president because he had said a few months ago that he was not prepared to pay for something that he did not even ask for, even going as far as getting the police minister to justify that those refurbishments in his home, including an animal pen and a swimming pool, that they were security upgrades. And we also saw huge protests outside the courtroom. Let's have a look at a report filed by my colleague Karen Allen.
One home for one family, Nkandla, Jacob Zuma's private estate and the site of one of the biggest scandals to rock his presidency. Security upgrades worth millions of pounds were carried out using the public purse. An abusive office claimed an independent investigator in 2014, but her findings were ignored. The renovations to the president's home include an amphitheatre, a visitor centre, a chicken run and kraal or animal pen for Jacob Zuma's cattle, and the much talked about swimming pool, which the president's staff insist is a fire pool, just in case of emergencies. The case has brought angry protests from opposition parties outside the Constitutional Court, where judges are determining if President Zuma knowingly exceeded his powers.
The president failed his oath of office, his duty to protect the public purse. On many and several occasions, he has said that he did nothing wrong. He has said that he won't pay back the money, and then Parliament has steamrolled processes that have undermined the public protector's office.
Inside the highest court in the land, weighty legal arguments about the president's actions and the checks and balances on power, which appear to have failed.
It goes to a systemic failure of government to hold to account that which is ultimately excessive, a homestead for one family with 250 million rand.
President Zuma's lawyers say he felt the law was unclear. He didn't realise the independent investigator's findings were legally binding.
The protesters here know this is more than about getting the president to pay some of the money back. It's about holding the executive to account and restating the independence of the anti-corruption chief, the public protector.
Back in Nkandla, the president's neighbours still remain loyal. These women, like many locals, told me they've visited his home and say if millions of pounds have been spent, there's not much to show for it.
It's not a luxurious house, it's a modest home, she says. I don't know what all the fuss is about.
But the fuss is about safeguarding public funds, stemming a culture of excess and tackling corruption at a time when so many South Africans still remain desperately poor. Karen Allen, BBC News in Kandla.
Now, at the moment, judgment has been reserved by the Constitutional Court. We don't know when the 11 judges will make their ruling, but we could be hearing from the judges saying that the president has breached his constitutional, the Constitution, which could possibly mean that the doors would be open for President Jacob Zuma to be impeached. So that is why we heard from the president's lawyer saying that he is denying the allegation that he breached the Constitution.
And Komla, we just heard Karen there saying this is not just about paying back the money, it's also about holding the executive to account. How much damage does this do to President Zuma's authority?
Well, this is yet another scandal under President Jacob Zuma's name, and a lot of South Africans are unhappy about what has happened. And if the president, if basically the opposition parties want the president to be impeached, that could have a big impact on the ruling and governing ANC, because this year South Africa is also going to be holding the local government elections, where President Zuma is obviously aiming to make sure that his party wins those elections.
So potentially this could damage a lot of the ANC's reputations and their chances at the local elections. But just looking ahead, Nomsa, will this satisfy the fact that President Zuma has now agreed to pay back some of the money? Do you think this will satisfy the opposition parties who've taken this to the Constitutional Court, or will they fight on for recovering all the money?
It's highly unlikely that this will make the opposition parties happy, because we've also heard from the same opposition parties who have taken President Zuma to court, particularly the economic freedom fighters led by Julius Malema, saying that when the president delivers his State of the Nation address this Thursday, they will disrupt him if he does not tell the country why he fired the finance minister in December, which had huge economic implications for the country.
Leave it there. Thank you very much. Nomsa Maseko in Johannesburg. Let's look at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world now. Uganda's former intelligence chief has been remanded in custody until after the forthcoming general elections. General David Sejusa was charged last week with insubordination after being accused of attending political rallies against the orders of the Chief of Defense Forces. He denies the charges. Police say at least 9 people have been killed and dozens injured in a head-on collision between 2 passenger trains in southern Germany. Many of the injured are in a critical condition. The early morning crash caused several carriages to derail. A gambler in Kenya has killed 2 casino managers after losing his money. Police say the Tanzanian man, who had lost $300, was later stoned to death by a mob. The incident happened at a casino in Nairobi's Eastleigh district. Well, that story is very closely related to our next one, because online sports gambling and betting has taken Kenya by storm, with thousands of people now participating in weekly multi-million shilling jackpots. Online and mobile betting sites are barely 2 years old in the country, but have now overtaken traditional casinos and betting houses in both client numbers and revenue. Economists predict the gambling industry will be worth more than $50 million within the next 3 years. The BBC's Emmanuel Igunza has been finding out what's driving the trend.
Under the scorching sun in a low-income area of Nairobi, a group of young men discussed the latest craze in town. Each one here hoping to win millions in online betting. All they need is a basic mobile phone and as little as $1 to take part in any of these dozen or so platforms now available on the market. They can place bets on matches from the local soccer leagues, top European teams, and even the less known ones from Asia and the Middle East. Fanuel Kadenge has been a cobbler and shoe shiner for more than 5 years. He earns the equivalent of just $10 each day. But that doesn't stop this staunch football fan from betting 5 times a week, even when he knows he can barely afford it.
Luck can be delayed, but if it's your luck, it will happen. I will continue betting. Many people are trying. When it's time for my luck, I will win.
Such is the financial muscle of the players that one company of the weekend organized a gambling festival. Participants enjoyed a musical treat from Kenya's top artists and hourly cash prizes of up to $500. This was once a thriving casino right here in the middle of the city. Its doors are now closed because it's facing huge competition from the online and mobile-based betting services. Despite the millions of dollars involved in this industry, analysts are warning that the country is facing an even bigger problem.
So that the Kenyans and other people...
Sami Wambogo is a psychologist dealing with people with various addictions. He tells me the country is now dangerously moving towards developing a gambling problem.
It's a growing industry. It will be there. It's based on people being or wanting to get much more too soon. And therefore they are willing to risk their resources and themselves and to be part of the game. It's a game of chance. You know, and you hear people along the way saying, oh, I have my winning numbers. I have my way I play in the morning. I have my luck Wednesdays. I mean, people come to think that way, to rationalize a game of chance. It doesn't work.
Cautious words that many Kenyans are choosing to ignore in their pursuit of becoming the country's next millionaires. Emmanuel Igunza, BBC News, Nairobi.
Well, it's not just Kenya that has seen a rise in online betting. Across the continent, Nigeria too is witnessing something of a boom. Thompson Eja runs one such betting firm in Nigeria called Plenty Millions. He joins us now from Lagos. Thompson, we just heard that story from Nairobi about the man who lost $300 and killed 2 employees of the betting firm. That's one of the reasons why people think gambling is a social problem.
That's really very unfortunate. We don't want to see incidents like that. But I think what has to happen in a growing industry of this nature is that we need to, the industry needs to look at the data and try to discover trends and find out if there are challenges and use the data found out to use and try and mitigate challenges of this nature. We don't want people shouldn't overindulge, whether it's in the gaming industry or in any form of industry. But the reality really is, if you take a place...
Yeah, I was just going to come in there and say that. You say people should not overindulge. You operate primarily in Nigeria. I mean, do you have any safety nets in Nigeria to, you know, to help people with addictive personalities or people who've lost all their money?
Well, here's what we do. I can tell you what we do in my region. We look at the data and we try to find out patterns of folks that are spending way too much money in our industry and call them up and say, listen, you need to turn it down. And if you don't, really, we'll disable you from playing on our platform. We can't, you cannot litigate or control people's actions of choice.
But that's to say, that's also to say that you know it's a problem, because Thompson, you personally don't even like referring to it as gambling. You'd rather call it betting.
Well, I'll call it gaming. I will call it gaming, and gaming is really, it's really, if you want to think about it, it's entertainment for some of us. Okay, football, if you take football for instance, really it's passion. You know, and people really are putting a little of their money, you know, into their passion. You know, so yes, there will be challenges. I mean, Peter, I'll say to you like this, if I ask you what are the top 4 really causes of death in the world, one of them is the automobile industry. I mean, people through car accidents die a whole lot in the world. We're not going to ban cars from the roads, but what we're going to try to do is find a way to build cars better to mitigate those riscs.
Okay, I mean, Thompson, let's stay with betting. Let's just stay with betting. I mean, your company is called Plenty Millions. It's called Plenty Millions. Who makes the Plenty Millions? Is it you, or is it your clients or the punters?
Well, you know, there's a law in place, like most places in the world. 50% of the revenue, according to the law, goes back to the players. Okay, this is almost the same thing across the world. In the UK, it's about the same thing, or slightly more in the UK. But I think the bigger thing to understand it's a growing industry. This industry has probably generated the most employment in the past 2.5 years in Nigeria. I mean, we've probably done about 100,000 new jobs in Nigeria. You know, in an environment where jobs are very, very difficult to come by, we have to look at the opportunities and we have to look at the challenges.
Okay,
I think the opportunities, giving you an opportunity to enjoy your passion, it's not that bad, really. But the key is the industry needs we do need to look at the data and figure out challenges and try to mitigate those risks. We don't see people losing their lives over
Thompson, we have to leave it there. We're running out of time. But thank you very much. Thompson Edger speaking to us live there from Lagos. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwache. A little later in the program, Piers will be here with all the sports news, including a look at why this protest by fans of Egypt's Zamalek was so significant and what exactly they were unhappy about. I'm Peter Okwache. The top story this hour. Lawyers representing South Africa's President Jacob Zuma said he will repay taxpayers' money spent on non-security improvements to his private home in Nkandla. Now, as we've been reporting here on Focus on Africa, the world's economy is slowing down. So the demand for commodities is falling as well. This has taken its toll on the mining industry. And today, the biggest mining conference in the world got underway in Cape Town. And those attending will be assessing the colossal jobs cuts and falling investments, hoping that the situation will improve on the last few months. 2015 was a terrible year for miners. The price of copper, gold and platinum all fell over the last year. The industry has had to dramatically cut costs. South Africa, the world's largest platinum and manganese producer, could lose as many as 32,000 jobs in the sector. And as commodity prices slid in 2015, so did the currencies. The South African rand down 25% last year against the US dollar. But although demand for some commodities is dwindling, there are other markets opening up. Take phosphate, for instance. It is used in fertilizer and needed by the agricultural sector, but can only be found in the US, the Middle East and Africa. With production dwindling in the US and political insecurity in the Middle East, Africa is where investors are looking to. Well, I'm now joined by Roderick Smith. He's the director of the mining group Cominco that have been investing in the Republic of Congo. Thanks for coming in, Roderick.
Pleasure, Peter.
Let me start by asking you, why are some commodities doing well and others not so well?
Well, when we talk about world economic growth falling and commodities falling off of demand and prices, we're really talking about China. Because China has been using between 40 and 60% of all of the major commodities, copper, lead, zinc, iron, chrome, as they industrialise, and they've done their industrialisation. So like Japan industrialised in the 60s and 70s, used all these things, we're now going back to a more sustained development. And demand for commodities is actually huge, but there's excess capacity in some minerals that China no longer needs in such big quantities.
Now, you've gone to invest in the Republic of Congo, and
yes.
I understand that what you've discovered there is the largest phosphate deposit anywhere in the world. You've put $50 million so far into
Yes.
these mines. How much are you hoping to get back in return?
Well, the development will now cost another $600 million, and the net present value of the project's $1.8 billion. But annual sales will be about $400 million, and we'll be employing 1,000 people in doing that. So it is quite a lucrative business.
Indeed, and you know, but we all know the history about foreign companies going to invest in Africa, out all this material and leaving, making a lot of money, but leaving the people there poorer than they were before. What's your company doing differently to make sure this is not your story?
Well, I can't speak for others, but I know in the Republic of Congo, the government is actually really savvy. We have with them a very comprehensive mining investment agreement which talks about job opportunities and returns to the community. We have committed to put in place training programs to educate people and bring them up to senior jobs over a 5-year period. And so there is a lot in it for them, and there's taxes and royalties paid as well, of course.
If we look across the borders to the DR Congo, we hear stories every day about safety in the mines, people dying, people being trapped. Are you doing things differently? Are you trying to change this narrative?
Yes. Well, again, I can't speak for the DRC and local companies there, but international companies, and importantly, their bankers and investors, big funds, subscribe to the Equator Principles, which, as you know, require us to follow World Bank performance standards, which mandate everything. So really, whether the local country in Africa you're dealing in has standards of their own yet, if they haven't yet put in place the bureaucracy and the performance standards, we're bound by these international standards, which control everything from provision of safety equipment, even the minimum size of rooms that they board in. So I think you'll see always an improvement in this area.
Roderick Smith, we'll see that when you start production fully. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us. You're watching Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. And Piers, Sunday Olise, Nigeria's coach, problems on the pitch and off the pitch.
Indeed, Peter, yes, thank you. Yes, the Nigeria coach has apologised to his country's football federation after a recent video rant during which he hit out his perceived critics. Sunday Olise, who was appointed last July, had come under pressure when he failed to guide Nigeria into the knockout stage of the recent African Nations Championship Chan in Rwanda. This is what he had to say.
I am addressing this insanity that has befallen some of our critics. And I call it insanity because you must be insane to start seeking a plebiscite on the future of the national team's coach of Nigeria because we lost Chan. With all due respect, Chan is probably the least important tournament that is held by CAF.
CAF being African football's ruling body. Well, you get the idea of the rant today. Olise, who had been trending on social media in Nigeria after his outburst at the weekend, apologised to the Nigerian Federation Board. What has local reaction been? Well, the BBC's Oluwashina Okaleji is in Lagos.
Sunday Olise's apology has not really gone down well with fans here in Nigeria. The fans are still upset by the coach's latest outburst on YouTube, where he took on his employers as well as critics. Some are of the opinion that he lacks the mental strength as well as the experience to coach and also survive under pressure. He's crumbling, many says, and some have even come out to roundly criticize him for his decision to take to a letter instead of going back to YouTube to apologize to the entire populace. Nigeria have two crucial games against Egypt in March. Many fans are worried that a man crumbling under this pressure might not really translate the same confidence to his players on the pitch.
To Egypt now, where great rivals Al Ahly and Zamalek are clashing as we speak. The league match is being held without fans, but Zamalek supporters have certainly been making themselves heard this week. On Monday, they gathered on the anniversary of an incident in which over 20 of their number died while attempting to attend a match in. The decision to protest was taken despite the threats of the head of Zamalek, who claimed he would open fire if fans approached the club's headquarters. So they went to a park instead. The BBC's Sally Nabil has the details.
First of all, this is one of the few major gatherings that we have seen here in Egypt over the past 2 years since President Sisi came to power, because there is this demonstration law that prohibits from organizing any huge gatherings without notifying or getting the approval from police authorities. So according to many commentators and the social media, that this proves that the spirit of the revolution is still alive. What we understand is that the people were trying to call for accountability. They believe that police forces are responsible. They say that they have violently dealt with the fans, they fired tear gas, and up till now nobody has been brought into justice from the police authorities.
Well, in response, the police say the claims are unfounded and that it is the fans who caused chaos by storming the stadium. Finally, spare a thought for these cyclists trying to compete in a race in Spain. The third round of the Volta a la Marina had to be abandoned after incredibly strong winds forced riders to their bikes and vice versa. Gusts of up to 150 kilometres per hour were reported in Benidorm, and unsurprisingly, the race was called off. And if it had happened, Peter, I think they would have truly been flying.
I find that so funny.
I love the fact that they have to hold the motorbike up.
I know. Great stuff. Many thanks, Piers. And that's it from Focus in Africa. Thanks for watching from me and the team. Goodbye. It's crazy stuff.